The Irish War of Independence started in 1919 and ended in 1922 with the establishment of the Irish Free State. It was almost immediately followed by a civil war due to various disagreements between the two sides. It's a very complicated situation that I would urge anyone to read up on. Unfortunately, I can't give the appropriate gravitas right now. Long story short, a country that had been united was now divided. Innocent and guilty alike were targeted by friends, family, neighbors. It was a bad time. The Civil War ended in 1923 after 11 months of blood and misery. Some combatants had been in constant action since 1919. Some had been fighting even longer, having taken part in the 1916 Rising and earlier skirmishes. This would have been years of late night raids, gunfights, guerrilla warfare, death, and the threat of death. Most of these people were not career soldiers. They were not put through any kind of psychiatric evaluation or appropriate training. These were farmers, teachers, doctors, nurses, normal people. Many of these people were left haunted by what they had done and what they had seen. A lot of them probably would have had PTSD or shell shock, as well as other physical and mental health issues that went either untreated or improperly treated. Some of the symptoms of PTSD include re experiencing traumatic events through nightmares, flashbacks, pain, physical symptoms. In the modern era, fireworks are a very common trigger. Next up is avoidance and emotional numbing, drinking, drug use, throwing yourself in any kind of distraction, or counterpoint is completely locking yourself off and refusing to feel anything. Next, we have hyperarousal, constantly feeling that you're on edge, paranoid, that something is going to happen and you need to be able to react immediately. Those are the main symptoms. Some other symptoms include depression, anxiety, destructive behavior, just tying in with drinking and drugs, chest pains, headaches, and other physical symptoms. Today, for people going through PTSD, there are options and many fantastic supports are available. Some of the treatments include cognitive behavioral therapy, group therapy, even medication. These supports are there if you need them, but unfortunately, Ireland in the 1920s did not have these supports, and the men and women who went through the 1916 Rising, the War of Independence, the Civil War, were often left to face their demons all alone. Our subject this evening is Commandant Leo O'Brien. He joined the IRA in 1913 and took part in many operations up to the end of the War of Independence. Among other things, he was in the Jacobs Garrison in the 1916 Rising, acting as a messenger to the Citizens' Army men in Stephen's Green. After this, he was active with the various IRA units around Dublin. Among the attacks and bombings he took part in, he was one of the party who shot an enemy intelligence agent on one RAC Sergeant John J. Fitzgerald at 28 Earlsforth Terrace. Fitzgerald was one of 14 shot that morning of November 21st, 1921, as part of an assassination operation organized by Michael Collins. This was to take out the Cairo Gang, a group of undercover British intelligence agents working and living in Dublin. In revenge for this, British forces opened fire on the crowd at a GAA match later that day. This day will go down in history as Bloody Sunday, and as a result of this, British intelligence forces took a beating from the loss of the Cairo gang, and support for the IRA increased both in Ireland and abroad. On the evening that the truce was agreed and the War of Independence finally came to an end, he was company commander of G Company, who were to have taken part in attacks on police and military across Dublin. According to one of the unit, if it had not been called off, this would have been the most sensational action since the Rising. Following the War of Independence, he joined the Irish Army when the Free State was established. He rose through the ranks, and by 1934 he'd reached the rank of commandant. At some point, he married one Leonie Marie. Leonie's family included Bridget, her mother, Gabriel, her sister, Gabriel's husband John Stokes, or Jack to his friends, their son Louis, and an unmarried sister, Maureen. As a side note, Stokes' father had been a member of the RIC, or Royal Irish Constabulary, the predecessor to the An Garda Síochána. As a quick overview, the RIC were essentially militarised police used to enforce English law in Ireland. And as I noted earlier, an RIC man was one of the men killed by Leo's group on Bloody Sunday. Stokes was a man who came from the kind of people that Leo had been fighting for years. At 6:30 p.m., 3rd of November 1934, Leo knocked at Bridget's house and asked if Jack was in. He then entered the house and waited in the sitting room as Jack came downstairs. According to Bridget, they took position on opposite sides of the table, Jack with his back to the fire and Leo facing him. At some point, a revolver had been placed on the table near Stokes, who told Bridget and his wife Gabriel, "Don't touch it. It's real. And I want you and your mother to be witnesses." Gabriel then took her place beside her husband. The two men began to argue, drawing the attention of Maureen and a servant girl. Jack was heard to snap, "Up to last night I've held my tongue." Leo shouted back, "You finished my life with Leonie, and I'm going to finish yours now." Took out his own gun and smoothly shot Jack 3 times. Jack managed to gasp out, "Oh my God," and tried to escape, but died on the floor. The noise drew in 5-year-old Louis, who was then dragged out to spare him the sight of his dead father. Leo then calmly put his gun away, announced he was going to turn himself in, and cycled away. At 7:10 p.m., he presented himself at the Gardaí and asked if Jack was indeed dead. When he was told that he was, Leo stated that the bastard son of an RIC man was no loss. In March 1935, Leo took the stand in Dublin Central Criminal Court and pleaded not guilty. Over the course of the trial, it came out that Leo and Jack had apparently been on good terms until a few weeks before the shooting, when something happened between them. It seemed to have started when Louis visited his uncle Leo in the barracks and was returned home hungry. The two families later met up, and Jack made mention of Leo gambling and dog racing. Leo had been having some financial issues, which we'll talk about in a moment, and that must have stung. Something to the effect of, "If you weren't wasting money down the dog track, you probably would have been able to feed my child." Then things got stickier when Gabriel came to visit her sister, Leonie, unannounced, with 2 friends. Leonie turned them away, not maliciously, she was just busy and couldn't entertain them. On the evening of the shooting, Leonie would visit Gabriel and her mother to explain. We can't be sure what exactly was said to Leonie during this evening, but we know that Jack accused Leo of going with other women and giving them expensive presents. Marie, Leonie's mother, would go further, saying, "I never thought I'd see the day when my daughter would turn her sister from the door because of that blackguard from the barracks who was going around with other women and neglecting his wife and child." Leo denied this accusation and shortly after would shoot Jack 3 times in front of his wife, mother-in-law, and son. Leo had been having money troubles. Jack and Marie believed he was spending money on other women besides his wife, but Leo denied this. He claimed that he had an overdraft of £60 and the bank was supposed to take it back in installments of £10 over 6 months, and had instead retained all his wages, and he was still short. He eventually managed to get a loan from a friend of £100, which cleared his debt and covered his month's wages. Stress of dealing with that, on top of what he called false accusations of infidelity, proved too much, and he went into a kind of a fugue state, only coming back to awareness in the Garda station after the murder. Leo's defense team made a point of using his mental health and the impact of a lifetime fighting to try to paint him as less guilty. That he was temporarily insane and not in control of his actions. That it was a random act of violence. Compounding this is the fact that he was not seen by any kind of doctor for nearly a week after the shooting. Dr. Richard Leeper testified that Leo was neurotic, had exophthalmic, goiter, and Graves' disease, which causes paranoia, obsessions, violence, and an agitated melancholic state. Dr. John Fitzgerald at Grange Gorman Mental Health Hospital stated that Leo was both neurotic and mentally unstable, and may not have been aware of his actions on that night. On the other hand, the doctor for the prosecution found Leo to be perfectly stable, but that was more than a year after the shooting. On the stand, Leo O'Brien himself stated, "All of these experts were agreed that I am physically of a neurotic or highly strung temperament and, therefore, predisposed to emotional instability, and as such I am more liable than another to come under an uncontrollable impulse. And which is most important, they also agree that this abnormality is the result of continued strain from a number of years on my nerve system, caused by the possibility of meeting a sudden and violent death during the period of hostilities 1916 to 1919 and 1921. Since 1913, when I became a member of Na Fianna Éireann, I have unstintingly given my best service in the fighting forces of our country, and have during that period of over 21 years unbroken service. I have never at any time been guilty of any misconduct or breach of discipline. Also, my honour and character, both military and otherwise, have always been without stain or blemish." The whole trial boiled down to how aware was Leo O'Brien. Was he lost in a temporary insanity? Or did he know exactly what he was doing, and he's using it as an excuse? The jury deliberated for 3 hours, but were unable to come to a conclusion. A second trial in June 1935 found him guilty of murder, but recommended mercy. The judge sentenced him to death, to be executed on the 14th of August 1935. A massive campaign gathering almost 60,000 signatures managed to get his death sentence commuted to life imprisonment. Leo O'Brien would ultimately be released in 1947 after serving 12 years for the murder of his brother-in-law, Jack Stokes. There is one big issue with the mental health defense. That's the revolver on the table. Let's talk about this revolver. That revolver did not belong to Jack Stokes. It belonged to Leo. When Leo entered the house, he placed it on the table near Jack and began to argue with him. This revolver was loaded, but it had been tampered with. It wouldn't fire. Leo intentionally placed a loaded revolver on the table right beside Jack. And this gun had been sabotaged. Was Leo trying to provoke Jack into grabbing the revolver, creating a situation where, well, I had to defend myself, he pulled a gun on me? But either Jack didn't rise to the bait or Leo was just too impatient. Either way, Jack didn't touch the revolver. Leo took out his own and shot him 3 times. If this is what indeed happened, that's a clever plan. It's planned out. That was cold and methodical. This was not a random act of violence. This is someone intentionally attempting to create a situation where you would need to draw a gun. And most importantly, that gun was sabotaged so it wouldn't fire. You were perfectly safe. And he pulled that out very, very quickly. So, was Leo O'Brien a cold-blooded murderer who eventually got away with it? Or was he a victim of a lifetime of violence and mental illness? Was he both? Alright, Happy New Year, everyone, and Happy Valentine's Day, I suppose. It's been a while again. Christmas and work got in the way, and as well as some minor technical issues last week. Hopefully, 2021 will be better than 2020. I'm hoping to have more free time to work on this channel with work. And before anything else, I would like to give a shout out to Scones and Darcy over at Monday Morning Macabre, who did a great podcast episode about Peter Bergman. Fascinating case, check them out. Check them out on Spotify under Monday Morning Macabre, they're great. And otherwise, I will see you when I see you.